Hello,
Kafaya, should I wait for
everyone.
your intro to start?
Oh, right on time. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the Start Omaha Work Week. For this session, we would be discussing getting started with online advertising. Just a few quick housekeeping items. All questions need to be asked in the chat. Our presenter would like to answer your questions as they come on, so it helps to just send them in the chat. He'll be paying close attention to the chat for your questions. And for those of you that would like to watch this program again, it will be posted to our Do Space YouTube page later this week or next week. And just as a reminder, after each program, make sure you head back to Beanstack, our community engagement platform, to mark that you attended this webinar and enter to win some amazing prizes. So we're giving away 3 gift cards to small local businesses and 1 headshot session. So just make sure to go mark that you attended today to get those prizes. And I'm going to put the links to all of that in the chat so that you can grab the opportunity. And yeah, so now I'm going to hand it over to our presenter for today, Chris Beecham from Click Targeter. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Kafaya, and thank you for that intro. And welcome everybody to my webinar, Getting Started with Online Advertising. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me today, so I appreciate that. Also, I just want to give a big thank you to Do Space for putting this on. I used to, when I was starting my own business, I went to a lot of Do Space classes. There was one in particular, Getting Started with QuickBooks. And it was one of those things that I knew I needed to learn how to do QuickBooks, and then just being able to go there and kind of get hands-on learning was exactly what I needed. And so it's an honor for me to kind of be in that teacher seat now and be able to help other people kind of where I was. And just looking forward to next year when we can all be back in person at the Do Space building on 72nd and Dodge. And so we'll just kind of get into things. Today's webinar, of course, it's called Getting Started with Online Advertising. One thing that I would kind of ask is, I want to get as many kind of chats, and I was just talking with Kafaya about this before we went live. And so one of my goals is just to get as many kind of questions, get as many chats as possible. I have a bunch of content that I hope to get to, but I would almost be more happy if we didn't get to all the content because you guys are asking questions, because not only because do you guys going to learn the specific stuff you want to get out if you're asking questions, but it's also just more fun for me. And one of the sections before I even get into the kind of overview of the webinar is a quiz. And so I have some quiz questions ready to go, and it's going to be kind of how much should these different industries be paying for their ads, which type of ad should they be doing. But when I get to that quiz section, what I'm hoping is that maybe we can get some volunteers to just throw out their own industries, and then we can go through and see, okay, hey, basically, like, where should you be advertising? How should we be doing this? What's a good rate look like? And so I guess just one thing is, I'll say right now, if anyone has anything specific you want to get out of the webinar today, just go in and type it into the chat. And just anything you'd like to learn. If there's one thing you want to really learn and you don't write in the chat, I might not ever get to it. And so basically write your questions in the chat or forever have your peace. And let's just kind of get going. So obviously, getting started with online advertising. My name's Chris Beecham. I run a company called Click Target. I'll talk about that in a second. And just sort of overview of what I want to kind of get across today. These are my teaching points. And so even before I get into my teaching points, along this side here, you guys will see kind of how I have it structured. First, we're going to go through different ad networks. And that's a little bit of a technical term, network, but kind of when you guys leave this webinar today, I want to make sure it's totally worth your time, worth your money. And so at the end, you guys are going to walk away knowing exactly which ad networks make sense for your specific business, which type of ads make sense. So kind of these first 2 points, ad networks, ad types, that's kind of more basic stuff. I would call this sort of setting the table, just getting all our food, all our utensils out there. So when we do really dive into the good stuff, we'll kind of have an idea of just the landscape, who are the big players. Okay, after we do networks, ad types, we're going to go into a little bit more of the trickier subjects called conversions, which is a technical term. That's how are you going to track success with your ads. This is super duper important. And then talk about bidding. This is also a little bit of a technical thing, but that's just, you guys are going to have to answer this question of how much should you be willing to pay per click. This is going to be after you know what type of ad, where you're advertising, how you're tracking success. All this stuff is going to determine how much would you pay for one click. And then the other two things I just have here is by attending this webinar, spending 1 hour today, I'm hoping it can save you guys at least 10 hours of headaches moving forward. And specifically by just knowing what kind of not to do. And a lot of people are, I'm assuming, coming in today with a general idea of something they're trying to get accomplished. And so sort of a lot of that stuff in this webinar is things I wish someone would have kind of sat me down day one and went over everything. And I just think of this stuff as kind of the need to know most expensive mistakes you can make. And one other thing is you'll notice on kind of the outline, setup is actually the very last item. And I was thinking of having setup be the first one, because when you create these accounts, obviously one of the first things you have to do is go into Google, go into Facebook, set up your actual account. But the more I kind of thought about it, the more I thought that starting with the setup could actually be one of the worst things that can happen. Because if people are starting off with the wrong type of ad, or they're starting off with the complete wrong place, wrong bid, that's when these kind of expensive mistakes can really start and then sort of snowball out of control. And so I was just thinking, okay, the whole goal is just avoid anything snowballing out of control and making sure like everyone who attends this is going to know all the mistakes and obstacles to avoid moving forward, so they can just not only save time, but save money. And so just these 4 questions are going to be really big, the different ad networks. I want you guys to learn who are the big players, and you're going to be kind of surprised when you realize how few there are. Different ad types, conversions, clicks. I want you guys to really be sure to answer these 4 questions. So we actually put a little quiz in here, and I have been attending some of the other Get Started sessions, webinar sessions, and no one I've seen has had a quiz so far. And so I don't mind to be kind of tough, and I'm definitely a stickler when it comes to this stuff. And so I want you guys to be sticklers too. And I already saw a question from Karen who says she really wants to make sure that her money is going to the best place to reach the most people looking for a gateway to a Nebraska bed and breakfast. Okay, that's cool. And so I'm just gonna make a little note actually. Bed breakfast. Karen, I'm gonna use that as an example later on, so that'll be cool. You'll actually know like specifically where you should be advertising and stuff. And so let's just get into it. Oh yeah, I forgot I had this slide in here. And so in that previous slide, I was saying I'm going to show you guys kind of the rules, or at least the rules of thumb on how I think about going or just approaching these questions. But I heard this I just read this little quote earlier this week. It's from Picasso, and it says, "Learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist." And I'm sure he was not talking about online advertising when he said this quote, but kind of the reason I wanted to put this in is in this webinar, I'm going to be kind of telling you guys the rules, quote unquote, but in reality, there are not really any hard and set rules to advertising, in my opinion, from my experience so far. But just the sort of spirit of what I'm trying to get across today is figure out these basic rules, what should and shouldn't apply. And then at some point, you're going to make the call and you say, even though Chris said this shouldn't apply to me, I'm going to go ahead and do it anyways. And in fact, I'll kind of spend the first 45 minutes laying down the rules. And then the last 15 minutes, when we really get into the questions, I'll probably be, oh, well, in your specific case, we're going to go ahead and try this more aggressive tactic or something to that extent. And so, too fast. I just want to do a really quick plug for my own company before we really get started. So basically, I have a lot of experience with online advertising just because I've been in the game for the last, last decade, but for the last 5 years, I've actually been running my own company called Click Targeter. I'll make this part quick. Basically, a lot of people that do online advertising end up wasting a bunch of money, and they don't know exactly which of their ads is a waste, which of their ads is not so much. And so kind of what we do is we work with people that spend a lot more money on ads and probably have been going for a while. And we have this software just connects to people's accounts. We can really analyze everything and kind of see where people are getting a good deal, see where we're getting a bad deal. So like Karen earlier said, she wants to make sure that all of her money is going to the best place. And so what happens a lot of time is when people get started, they might have like 5 ads or 5 little different tactics they're trying. And then after you go for a while, you can kind of look back and see, oh, of my 5 ads, really only 1 of them was good and 4 of them were not that great. And so basically Click Targeter, what we do is we work with people that are probably spending a lot and can go through and just help them get like a 15% increase. But for those guys, it's worth it. And so even though I do my own online advertising company, I don't mind just telling everyone how to do exactly what I do for free. And you might think that's crazy, but really, in my opinion, the more people who are on advertising online in the first place, the more that will inevitably be able to kind of work with me in the future. And so if anyone has some existing ads they need help with, here's my contact information. I'll put this in the chat too. And all the numbers on this report came from Statista, and this template that I'm using today was by company SlidesGo, and so I just want to give them a shout out as well. $139 billion. That's a really big number, and that's how much money was spent on all online ads last year in the United States. And like these numbers are way too big for me to kind of make sense of. When I see billions, it's just, it's so hard to really like conceptualize what that means. But just in retrospect, all of television spend in the United States was about half of this. And so a lot of people are really surprised to learn that more money is spent on online ads than on TV. But that was actually the case about 10 years ago. People started spending more on online than on TV. And sort of how I want to do this is really break down this $139 billion mark and just show you guys kind of where it is all getting spent. And kind of based on where it's spent, I'm going to talk more about these big players than the small players. And anyways, you'll kind of get a feel for what I mean as we move forward. But so point one here is we're talking about ad networks and ad sellers and kind of figuring out the little difference between those two. And so in 2020, we had the 139 billion spent amongst all online ads. But something that I think is interesting is that there's basically only 3 big companies that are keeping the lion's share of all that money. And so these big players are Google, Facebook, and Amazon. And so right now, Google Ads is the #1 largest online ad seller in the US and the whole world. And so not only are they the largest, but within Google Ads, they own these different networks, such as Google Search, the Google Display Network, and YouTube Video. And some people right now are probably going to be thinking, Chris, what are you talking about? This is like a little bit too technical for me. Talking about all these networks, how does it all fit together? And that's totally fine. In fact, since we only have 1 hour, we're going to be kind of cramming a ton of information all in this one short period of time. But one of the things that's going to happen is I'll probably introduce some concepts early on, and they're not going to make sense. But then once we get down to the quiz section, it's going to be kind of like, how does everything sort of integrate and fit together? So all I really want to say is if you guys feel a little bit confused, that's totally fine. Don't get too caught up. But right now, I just want everyone to be thinking, okay, of these different ad networks, which one should I be using? And so there's some people, when they start, they think, oh, there's so many different places I could be advertising online. But then once they really look into it, it says, oh, I should probably be on one of these 3 big players, such as Google, Facebook, or Amazon. And one of the things that's really cool about the online advertising is once you have success, you can really scale. And I'll get into this a little bit more, but basically the gist of that is, okay, once you kind of get your ads profitable, and maybe let's say I want to advertise, when I start, I want to do just Omaha, but then you start going a little bit, and for a lot of people, or for some people, every dollar they're spending on ads, they're making $1.50 or $2. And quickly they say, hey man, I want to start spending more. And so one of the big benefits of being on the Google platform is as soon as you have success, you can scale. And so as soon as you get the right website, right ads, and you have some proof that it works, you can go from Omaha to the whole US just like that. And learning these tactics can lead to incredible growth for a lot of online industries. And so, but it's still kind of confusing. And so even though these next 2 slides are going to be a little bit dry, being able to pick up the little differences between these ad networks is going to help you guys just pinpoint specifically what to do and what not to do. And so, okay, so Google, they own Google Search, they own Google Display. I'll talk about this more in a little bit. They own YouTube. Facebook obviously owns Facebook, but then Facebook owns Instagram, WhatsApp, and their own messenger system. And so one of the other things I'm getting at here is, let's say that someone out there had their heart set on maybe doing an Instagram ad. I'm thinking Karen with her Airbnb, possibly she could make a little post on Instagram. And what I'm getting at is if you want to go down that route of advertising on Instagram, what you need to do is sign up for a Facebook ads account. And so sort of takeaway from this slide is, even though there's a huge space in the whole online advertising industry, there's only just a few players. that really get most of that money spent on ads. The other takeaway here is that of these big players, Google owns multiple ad networks. So Google owns YouTube. Google owns this thing called Google Display, which is huge. And Facebook is also owning Instagram, WhatsApp. And so a lot of times in the news, there's always some article about people being mad at Google or Google getting sued for being a monopoly on online ads. And they used to have a lot bigger section than this 35, but basically Google is shrinking. And so I kind of have split feelings on Google. But the other thing I want to point out is Amazon here, they're by far the fastest growing. And so the other thing I would think about too is even before we get in down kind of deeper, I would challenge everyone to kind of think which of these makes the most sense for me. And so just a few kind of random thoughts. Facebook is great for reaching out to consumers, but not so great for reaching out to different businesses. And so if your customers are business B2B, Facebook's not really the greatest. You'll probably want to be more Google. Amazon is great for people that sell products. And so if you're selling a product, Amazon is probably the number one place you should start. If you're not selling products, Google, Facebook can make sense too. Don't get locked in on anything quite yet, but just know if you can learn these, if you can have success on these platforms, you can almost have unlimited success because you can scale. And so looks like we got another chat. I just want to read this before we get it. Yeah, Sterling said he missed the slide with my contact. I will type that in right now. Or crispy at. That's the best email. Okay. Ad types. So before I tell you guys about the different ad types and show you exactly what they look at, I wanted to start with this slide. And so we know we have $139 billion being spent, but how is that all spent? We know a lot of it was on Google, obviously, on Facebook, but then here's another completely different way to look at ad spend. Well, let's go back, Chris. And so we have search ads and display ads are 75% of all ads spend on the internet. And I'm going to kind of just hop around a little bit. Let's start with search ads. And basically the takeaway I want you to from this slide is that if people can understand the difference between just search and display. And let's start with search. What that is every time you go to Google, type in your question, a lot of ads are going to show up. And so when I say search ads, I'm specifically talking about ads that appear to people right at the exact moment they're searching for your product or something related to your product. And that's kind of why I think search ads are the best type of ad, is because they show exactly at the moment people are looking. But then the thing that's downside of search ads is these are by far the most expensive kind of ads. That's why they account for so much of revenue. But when I say search ads, I just want you guys to picture this. Just here's what I would call a regular search ad. You can tell it's an ad because they all have these little ads. Actually, sometimes it's a little bit tricky to tell if it's an ad or not. But a lot of times you got to pay to play to get to the top when it comes to Google or Yahoo. And so there's just traditional ad, there's the call only ad. This can work amazing for some industries, and I'll have specific slides about this. But a call only ad, this is a type of ad. It doesn't even let people go to your website. It just is going to result in a direct call right to your phone. And so I worked with some locksmiths. They love the call only ad because a lot of times their customers, hey, I'm locked out of my car right now. I don't really have time to go on and investigate all the best locksmiths in Omaha. I don't care. Just how fast can you get here? And so these are kind of the most expensive type of ads, but they're one of the most effective. If your business, if all your leads come through calls, definitely make a little note about call only ads. And then another ad type, we have product search ads. Sometimes when you do a search, it'll show up and have an actual product. And so search is really important. Some people kind of scoff this off at first, but it's only because they don't realize this is the number one, like, most expensive ad on the interweb. And it's great for people when the search ads are great, they're great, but you really have to be in a certain industry. And since they're so expensive, they don't really apply to everyone. And so the other alternative to the search is what I would call the display ad, AKA banner ad. And this is more like the traditional kind of ad that people think of whenever I bring up the subject of online advertising. In this first example, Omaha, here's an ad from omaha.com. And then there's an ad here at the bottom. These are all kind of just screenshots I took from my phone yesterday. And something else I want to bring up right now is this top ad is actually part of the Google Display Network. And so earlier I was saying something about the Google Display Network, but basically how this works is Omaha, World Herald, omaha.com, they have a little partnership with Google where they will rent some space on their website to be an ad. And then basically when I go on, I see that ad and a lot of people will think, oh, Omaha World Herald must have sold this ad. That's not really the case. Omaha World Herald just rented this space on their website, and then it gets filled with different ad depending on who is looking at that site at that moment. And then just the other note I wanted to have here is this top ad was part of the Google Display Network, and this bottom ad is actually not. And Omaha World Herald just had their own ad on their site. And so this is a little bit more advanced, but just this idea of a lot of websites who are selling ads are part of this display network. So that's cool that when you advertise on the display network, you can immediately be on omaha.com, like ESPN, all these huge websites, but then it's not always necessarily the case. And so this is just what I would call the image ad. The other type of display ad is kind of animated. I only have this in here to show that not all image ads are just static images. Some are actually kind of fun moving around. And this third one I had here is a display ad, or a product display ad, excuse me. This is from amazon.com. And for people that have products, obviously we were talking about Amazon as one of the best places, just best places to be, period. But if you're also advertising, it's one of the best bang for your buck places. And so it's not always totally clear if something is an ad, if it's not an ad, but right here just said it's sponsored. And so basically it's just kind of, it's a great way to advertise on the Amazon ads art, because a lot of times your message sort of blends in and the viewer doesn't realize, like, hey, that's not actually an ad. And so we know we got the quiz coming up, and one of the questions is which type of ad is right for you, right? So everyone, I want you guys to be thinking, okay, I already have an idea of which network I should be doing, but now I just want you, let's just think about, does search make sense or display? Or maybe some combination of the two. And so This is search ads. This is the display. There's also video and audio ads, but this is in the big picture, this is really a smaller amount. And so if people have questions and want to learn about video or audio ads, write it in the chat. But for the most part, I like to just focus on kind of the biggest areas because I figure it's going to be the things that apply directly to the average person. And so here's where we start kind of coming into the more tricky part of the webinar. And before I get into this slide, I want to say that this is the #1 most expensive mistake that I see. And so I was just talking a little bit earlier about my business, but kind of how I will typically work with a new client. The first thing I do is an audit of their existing ad accounts. We kind of just look and see, okay, of all your spend, what was good, what was bad. And then afterwards, I'll go in and I'll say, okay, based off of that, here's where you should spend more, here's where you should spend less. And the other thing I always say is, wow, you guys this whole time haven't been collecting all the data you should have been. And your most important thing to do is set up conversion tracking. And in fact, you guys should have set up conversion tracking day one. And so, point being, you guys moving forward, I don't want to ever have that conversation where I say you should have set this up when you got started. And so this term conversions, it's one of the most sort of misunderstood terms in the online advertising world. And some people use the word very ambiguously, and some people use the word very specifically. And right now you might be thinking, what the heck are you talking about, Chris? But what I mean is this term conversions is actually a specific term that's used within Google Ads, Google Facebook ads. But then some people will also use the word conversion rate to refer to just like maybe their amount of calls that turn into leads. And so my point being is that if you talk to 10 businesses and ask them what their conversion rate is, they'll probably give you, they'll give you 10 different responses for their conversion rate, but they'll literally be talking about 10 different things. And so a lot of people just kind of misunderstood about what conversions are. And so with this slide, I just hope we can get rid of all the ambiguity and just help you guys see kind of what Google Ads means when they say conversion rate, or what Facebook means. And basically, conversions are how these tools track success for their advertisers. And one of the things is that conversions can mean many, many different things. And so when you get your account set up, let's say on Google or Facebook, you'll go put in your information. I'll go more on this later, but one of the things it's going to ask you once you kind of got halfway through is, all right, how do you want to track conversions? And many people just skip this step and never get it set up right. And that's when they do the audit. I say, oh man, you guys should have done this. And I'll show you why. But basically, conversions, it's going to mean something different for every single business. And I'll give you guys some more examples once you see the quiz and once you see kind of the real world, how this applies, it's going to make more sense. But usually a conversion is either an online sale for someone that sells stuff online. For a lot of businesses, their conversion will be a lead that happens on their website. And so what that means, kind of to decipher it, is a lot of businesses are not selling online, and how it works instead is, hey, come to our website, fill out our form, and then we'll call you and eventually close the sale offline, in which case Google ads or Facebook ads will have a hard time telling if their click on the ad led to a sale because it's happening offline, but it can tell, hey, did this person even sign up for like more information? And so again, this will make more sense when you see how it fits in with everything else. But just know that most times a conversion can mean many different things. It can mean an online sale, it can mean a form, or it can be a call. Conversion, this is by far the trickiest part of setting up your online advertising account. In reality, conversion tracking, setting up conversions is its own 1-hour webinar at a minimum. And so there's different ways to get this set up depending on what your different conversions are. But right now, even before I get into more how it is set up, I just want everyone to be thinking, okay, what should my conversion be for when I start advertising? And so I know earlier someone gave the example of a bed and breakfast. So I'm kind of thinking, okay, online sales, would that make sense for a bed and breakfast site? And without even checking out this site, it's possible for some bed and breakfasts, you could definitely go and just sign up on their website. That's great. And in that case, it would be their conversion would be an online sale. But it's also equally as likely that maybe the website doesn't yet have the functionality where people can just go on and do everything, sign up all at once. And so they would have a form and it'll say, hey, fill out our form if you're interested, we'll contact you. And so another option would be maybe they don't have either of those, which would be cool if they did, but in which case the conversion would probably be a call. We don't necessarily want people to go into our site because they can't sign up yet. So we would just want to call. And all three of these, there's kind of different ways to get it set up. But right now, I just want you to think, okay, which of these applies to my own business? Which of these conversions should I be using to track my sales once I get everything set up? And again, I only use the quote conversions just because so many people have like totally different definitions of what conversions mean. But you want to be very, very specific with this. And I'll tell you why here in a second, but just staying on how to get this stuff set up. You have to put a little piece of code on your website. And like, for example, with online sales, we need to get your website talking to your Google ads. And you have to do that by putting in some code. A lot of people never get this set up quite right. And they think, oh, well, whatever, not that big of a deal. And they're not necessarily wrong. But the thing is, the big trend right now in online advertising is machine learning. And basically, that means that Google will just go into your account or Facebook or one of these big people, and they'll improve your account to help you get more conversions. But the thing is, if you don't have your conversions set up right, Google and Facebook and all these tools can get a very twisted view of like what's actually working. And a lot of people, this results in just a ton of wasted money. And I'm going to get into it. And this is where we're going to start getting into the math section of the webinar. I'm actually going to check the chat here. I haven't looked at that in a second. Here, one moment. I'm bringing up the chat bar. Okay, cool. No questions. But here's where it starts getting fun, you guys. And so even before I get to this page, I just want to kind of reset. So at this point, I want everyone to have thought about which ad network makes sense for me. And is it Google? Is it Facebook? Is it Amazon? We know those are the big three. Okay, which ad type makes sense for me? Search or display. Right now people probably have kind of an open mind, but when we start getting into the numbers, this is where things are going to start making a little bit more sense. And this is where the more interesting part of the online advertising happens. And so I just want to set it up by giving you guys this little question of which of these three ads was the best. And right here I have, it says ad A, ad B, ad C. And you can see how much they spent on these three ads. Right now, for this example, we could be 3 display ads, it could be 3 search ads, it could be 3 video ads. Kind of these principles I'm teaching you guys don't just apply to one type of ad, they apply to every single type of ad. And so what happens a lot is people will come in and I'll do a little audit for them. And it'll look something kind of like this. I'll be able to see, okay, of your 3 ads, I can see how much you spent on each one. I can see how many clicks you got. And basically a lot of people in this case will say, okay, Chris, I did my 3 ads, A, B, and C, and C was definitely the best ad for me. And I know that because I was sort of treating everything equal. Of my 3 ads, I said I was willing to pay 1 click for each one, and sort of the market decided. And since this ad got the most clicks, it obviously is the best. However, you guys will notice there's definitely some key information here missing. And so before I get on to the conversions, with this limited kind of information right now, Google would say, oh, ad C is your best ad. Okay, because it just was the most interesting. People clicked on it the most and everything else was equal. Therefore, C was the best ad. And for people that don't have conversion tracking set up, what's happening now, and this was not always the case, but this is the case moving forward, is Google will start spending more on ads that it thinks are the best. And so in this case, Google or Facebook would start putting more into C, less into A. But the reality is oftentimes much more different, much more interesting. And so if you were to kind of, this goes back to conversion tracking. Conversion tracking, this is a tricky thing to really like sink your mind into. It might not even like all make sense until like tomorrow morning when you wake up. You're like, oh, I was thinking about that webinar yesterday. But the thing that's very interesting is if you have this set up, a lot of people will find out what I thought was my best ad was by far my worst ad. And that's a hard thing to accept. But once you do accept it, the thing that's cool about online advertising is you can only do one type of ad. So what I mean is, in this case, we can see, okay, we thought C was the best because it got the most clicks. But for some reason, those people never bought. Those people never converted. Those people never signed up. And so the term conversions here, this is a little bit ambiguous. This could be online sales. This could be calls. This could be, you can actually really have set it to be whatever you want. But the point here is that like the best ad was actually ad A. And we didn't really, not many people clicked on it, but when they did click on it, it must have really been the right people because they actually signed up. And so kind of going back here, without having conversion tracking set up, this is my point I'm trying to get across. It'll be very hard to know what was a success, what wasn't a success. And so I know I keep going back to this bed and breakfast example. I like it, but like the one thing I would highly, highly, highly recommend is making sure you have yourself set up to track success moving forward. Because, you know, Karen might think, oh, I should only be spending on ad C. But if you really want to get the best kind of bang for your buck, you actually should have spent all on ad A here. And yeah, I have some more to say, but I'm just going to keep on going because I'm a little bit behind schedule with this and I want to get to all the good parts. And so conversions are important because they determine success. But then this next thing I'm getting to is called the cost per click or your bid. And so one of the things that's cool about online advertising is not only can we track it to your sales, track it to your leads, but we can control the click. And so what I would tell this person is, okay, we need to spend way less on ad C and more on ad A. They'll say, cool, I like it. How do we do that? So how you do that is through your bid. And so cost per click, I would go in and say, okay, let's spend way more. Let's raise up that click. And there's different ways you can set your clicks. I'm going to kind of go over this slide a little bit faster, but the hard part is basically knowing how much to pay for one click. And in the quiz section, that's where we're going to go over specific, how much should I be paying? How much should I not be paying? And before I get to that, I just want to go over, this is the most common question I get asked. And it's like, I'm curious, okay, I'm interested in how much on online advertising, how much does it cost? And a traditional advertiser, if you want to do TV or radio, how it would work is you'd say, hey, I'll give you $1,000 and you guys spend it the best way possible. Give me the most kind of bang for my buck. Give me the most people to see it for my money. But with online advertising, you have so much more control, which is one of the big reasons people are kind of getting away from TV and going to online. But anyways, how much it costs is, how it works is you just decide however much you want to spend. There's no upfront cost. And then you decide how much you're willing to pay for one bid. So in this case, people say, okay, got $500 I want to spend. I'm going to set my bid at $1. And so they should know they'll expect about 50 clicks. And so the crucial question here is, okay, well, how do I know if I'm paying that right amount for my clicks? And on the slide before, I kind of should have had this in different orders, but one of the things you can do is let Google ads, let Facebook ads set your bid for you. And they'll say, they have a really, by the way, one of the best options that if you're just getting started, it's called max clicks. And that's where you tell your advertiser, hey, I don't necessarily want to send my own bid. I want you to do it for me and just give me the most clicks possible. They have this option, give me the most impressions possible. They even have an option, give me the most conversions possible. And everyone thinks this is always the best one. Oh, I want to spend my money in the way I can get the most possible sales, most leads. However, if your stuff is, conversions are set up wrong, it's going to get totally twisted, and it's going to be kind of, earlier we were given the ABC example. This is it sounds great, but it can be terrible. And really what I wanted to get at is the other option. If this is kind of what I like to do, I don't always trust Google or Facebook. So I like to set my own bid. And here's sort of my own way of determining the starting bid. And so this is the quiz time, people. This is the hard part. And so up here it says, what is the right bid, ad type, and ad network for these three cases? And so far in the webinar, I've just been kind of planting the seeds, but here's where everything really comes together. And I'm hoping that you kind of see how these things relate. And so I'm gonna just have three examples here. And I'm gonna just go through each one. And okay, we're kind of going tight on time, but not too bad. On my other webinars, I went way over, so I'm happy to just be in the right time zone. And so anyways, let's start with case A here. And this is based off a lawyer or just a law firm. And how I always think about it, whenever I talk to a new customer, new business, the first thing that I kind of think about is, okay, how much is one sale worth to you? And so for a lawyer, it could be, they can make up to like $10,000 on a single case. And basically, the more you make off each sale, the more you should be willing to spend on advertising. That's of course true for any industry, but if you can answer this like specifically on the online advertising, you can get a huge advantage. Kind of walk you through exactly what I mean. And so kind of my process of like inner math that I always do whenever I see a new business example is, okay, how much do they make per case? And then in my mind, I always think, okay, I'm just like, if people get 100 clicks, how many will end up actually buying? And in my mind, I always use the number 2%. And what that means is I kind of multiply 1,000 by 2% and say, okay, well, if they can make $1,000 a sale, and if they can get 2 out of every 100 people that clicks to buy, then they should be willing to spend up to like $200 per one click. The point here is if you can do $200 a click, you can basically afford any type of ad and you can afford any type of network. And so it's cool if you're a lawyer and you make $10,000 a case, but not everybody is making that kind of dough for each sale. And so another example here I have is be kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. This is based off of, it's actually based off my brother. He's an author. He sells books. And he's making about $10 per sale. And when I say net revenue, his books are actually cost more than that, but he only gets to keep 10. And so I always think, okay, of the money you get to keep, times that by 0.2, he makes $10. If you're only making $10 a sale and you only have 1 out of 50 people buy, that means you really should only be spending about 20 cents per click. And one of the things, if you only making 20 cents per click, that's going to really limit the type of ads you can do. And so earlier I was saying kind of the minimum for search is probably at least $1. But then the maximum of search can literally be $200. And some people are going to say, oh my gosh, Chris, 20, like $1 versus 200. That's quite a range. I don't know if I'll be able to afford it for my business. And the one thing I'll kind of say, this is a little bit more complicated, but basically all this different kind of industries have different rates. And so if you're a lawyer, it's going to be really, really expensive to advertise online because all the other lawyers have kind of bid everything up. But if you're only selling books, like there's not going to be that much competition because none of the other booksellers are going to be willing to pay that much. And so basically, like if you're selling books, you can't spend that much. If you're a lawyer, you can spend a lot just because it makes sense. And so people at home kind of playing along, I just want you guys to think, okay, how much for each sale do I keep? Get that number in your mind, or probably write that number down on a piece of paper. Multiply that number times 0.2, and that's where you're gonna get your starting bid. And so for this third example, I'm gonna go to this one before I get onto the different sections of the quiz, but this would be a subscription-based service, maybe like Netflix or something like that. And so they'll say, okay, I get to keep $70 each month. And then, okay, does that mean I should only be able to, that means times 70 times 0.2, 140. And so this would kind of be where I would start, but then, I would think, okay, how long does the average person, how many months do they stay? And so, if it's 3 months, then you could kind of probably spend like 3 times this amount. And the point I'm trying to get across is there's not one right answer for every single business. It's going to depend on how much your individual business is set up. And so I want you guys to walk away not knowing like, oh, here's the right amount based off of this different industry. But the more important thing I want everyone to learn is just that kind of process for coming about that actual number of what makes sense for your own business. And then basically, if you're under $1, if you're under $5, search is never going to make sense for you. You're going to be just kind of display ads. If you're just doing display ads, it's like you obviously know, hey, I don't need to be on Google. I'm probably going to be just Amazon or Facebook. And so going through this kind of math, it's going to hurt because it's math and no one really likes to do math. But if you can actually do this, you're going to be so far ahead of the competition. And you'll just be like, once you do kind of look through, you'll know, does this make sense or does this not make sense? And I just had another question from the ad. It says, someone, is there a way to increase click sales upwards of 2%? And the question is, of course. And I use this number 2% just as kind of like my own internal like baseline as to get the starting bid. And these starting bids are not even really specific numbers. The big takeaway is just like, these are completely different thresholds. And so, okay, if you're only making $10 per sale, like, you're gonna need a higher conversion rate, or, if you have a higher conversion rate, you can get away with a higher bid. And so, and vice versa. If you have a low, you're gonna have a lower bid. But just, this is sort of the process I go through when coming into just kind of immediately when I meet someone, I'll sort of answer these 3 questions all right away. Okay, you make that much, so that means you can bid this amount. If you can only bid that amount, probably shouldn't ever be doing search. Okay, since we're not doing search, we're doing Google, or we're doing maybe Facebook. And so just kind of like through the power of deduction, you can get a good idea of what ad networks do and do not work, which ad types do and do not work. And so I want to keep on going here and just get my last 2 slides in. And so when you sign up for the Google ads or Facebook ads, the only thing you actually really need is for Google, a Google email, for Facebook profile, for Amazon, an official Amazon account. You just need that, and you need an active credit card. And you don't actually get billed. We were talking earlier about these programs bill you each time you get a click. And so there's no money really up front. You don't even have to have a website. And so a lot of people say, oh, I'm only going to start on my Google ads once I get my website up. But a better strategy would be to go in and create your Google ads account right away and just start playing around and seeing what are my options when it comes to ad creation. All these tools make it really super duper easy to make just like completely stunning ads that look great. And so that's actually really the easy part. I'm not even going to talk much about ad creation in the webinar. The other thing that's really important and to understand once you're getting started is, I'm just using Google ads and Facebook ads just because these are the 2 biggest ones, but the same principles really apply to all different kind of tools. But I'll use Facebook as an example. Within Facebook, there are a lot of different kind of pages. There's probably going to be your own Facebook business page. And then there's a completely different tool called the Facebook Ad Manager. This is where you'll create all your ads, is in the Ad Manager. Facebook has this other thing called the Facebook Business Manager. And so just like these different 3, I did not know the difference between these not too long ago. And obviously it helps to be able to know the differences in your mind. But the other thing is you need to actually have one Facebook profile that's linked to all these 3 things. And if all these 3 accounts are not linked, you're going to have some issues. Same with Google. A lot of people use this thing, Google Analytics and Google Ads. And I don't want to go too much into this, But all I want to say is to have the same email. Like I would recommend just having one email that is a link to all these accounts. It looks like we're running out of time, but I will have some few more questions. So how should I start? Hey, just give me like 3 more minutes and I'll answer this. How should I start a first ad if I'm in a specific location, product business? And so a specific location, I would check out. There's a tool called Google My Business. It's not even a direct ad, but anyone that's doing a Google My Business is great for local businesses. If you're selling a product, I would suggest Amazon. And Kafia, just give me 5 more minutes, or just give me 3 more minutes. I just want to power through these last 3 slides. But this is kind of just everything else I had that didn't fit in. And I'll go through this really fast, but know these things before getting started. Own your own account. A lot of times if people pay someone to set up their account, the people will set it up, but never give the advertiser, never give you access. And when you leave, they'll say, oh, you can't have any of this. But so just be sure to own your own account. You should be able to, if you can't log into your own ads, that's a bad sign. Fiverr.com, this is a great resource if you need someone to just make your own ad for you. Google AdSense, this is great if you want to sell ads on your own website. Maybe I don't want to have an own ad myself, but I want to make some money on the side because I'm getting a lot of traffic. You can use this program, Google AdSense, turn that traffic into money. Conversion-based bidding, do not do this unless you have conversions set up. Retargeting, I know this is a lot, but retargeting those are those ads that kind of follow people around. Maybe you were looking at like a watch on a website and then all of a sudden you see that watch ad following you around. That's called retargeting. That's pretty easy to set up, great value. And then this is my last slide. I just want to like public service announcement. The new trend in ad of these things called the local service ads. And it's totally different, but it's a call only ad. So it doesn't let people go to your sites. It's just straight to your phone. And it looks very different. And it's called Google Guaranteed. But if you're a lawyer or a carpenter or some local service, someone said they were a local product, this probably won't be for you, but if you're a local service, I would highly, highly recommend looking at local service ads. It's a situation where instead of paying for clicks, you're going to pay for calls. So you're probably going to be paying at least $10 every single call. But what's cool is you can review and listen to every single recording, and you'll quickly know if it's worth it or not. And so again, this is my last slide. Chris Beecham is my name. Click Targeter is my company. And if anyone has any questions about today's webinar and doesn't even want me to work with them, just has some questions, please feel free to reach out. Or if you need someone to take a look at your Google Ads, Facebook Ads account, definitely reach out. And yeah, we're a little bit over time, so I'm going to log off unless we have any other questions or Kafia has anything else to say.
Oh no, that looks to be all of the questions. Thank you so much, Chris. This was very informative. I don't have a business, but I already have a few tips for when I decide to start my own business. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and once you do, you'll kind of know how to at least think about it.
Yeah.
And so.
And thank you everyone for attending. Please don't forget to go onto our Bean Stack to get a chance to win some of our amazing prizes. I'm going to paste the link again in the chat for anyone that missed it earlier. And yeah, thank you everyone and have a wonderful day.
All right.
Bye.
Talk to everyone later.